Welcome to the Path of Exile 2 new facts and leaks about the game dug out that were confirmed by either the devs or Jonathan himself. I will go straight to the point, and if you are interested in any specific, just click on timestamps. Not all stash tabs will go from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2 because of the new currencies related to the endgame progression. Single-element resistant monsters will be more common in PoE 2, but it's not going to be the every boss has all res situation like in PoE 1. Also, switching to a skill that deals a different damage type should be a more viable alternative. No more mana multipliers. Gems with additional effects will not reserve more mana than the gem itself. Resists will still go below 0. Exposure will not work differently than in PoE 1. It will only work on mobs with elemental resistance related to that of exposure. PoE 2 will have more zoom max camera. There will be a new way to strafe walk, new ways for dual wielding like 2 shields, etc. But at the same time, there are more exceptions with different types of weapons in that term. Character timelines. When you make a character, you're basically deciding which way the timeline went, since all the other player characters you don't select also die when you select a character. Keep in mind that PoE 1 classes that appear in PoE 2 are completely different. Path of Exile. MOBA is not just a meme. There are talks about it. You can dodge roll into any iframe, but there are a few exceptions like leap slam, which cannot be cancelled by dodge roll. The bleed status will be only available for attacks, no bleed type spells in PoE 2. Crossbow attachments are kinda just like normal skill gems, except you equip them to your offhand instead of your skill window. Staves and Wands will have spells by default with the possibility to add support gems to them. Completely reworked, the minion system, permanent minions will be viable in PoE 2 as they put an enormous amount of effort into making it viable, which we will see in which showcase soon. Thorns builds will be viable in PoE 2, which are based on reflected damage to enemies. The pairs of classes with the same attribute alignment have the same starting location, so for example, Templar and Druid have a single shared start. There will be new types of elements for witches besides Chaos, Curses, and Minions. Content scaling will be like in PoE 1, which is hit pool based. Weapon-specific masteries in the passive tree are reduced significantly. PoE 2 will have a unique PvP system. Uniques will have specific animations related to combo and attacks, which will make them also visually unique. Life and mana reservation will be still possible, but it will work around the new spirit value. 2 different separate systems of animation. Many animations have defined start and end poses, and if the end pose of one animation matches the start pose of the next animation, then we do animation tech things to make them visually chain together more smoothly than the generic animation blending system we use. This is purely visual. There are other cases than shape-shifting where you can skip part of a skill's animation or play a different, shorter animation in certain circumstances. Monster armor and evasion could be figured out by looking at bi-mob animations. For example, slow and lousy zombies will have 0 evasion, naked mobs will have 0 armor, and it will be more common for mobs to have 0 armor and evasion. Builds variety and comparison, particularly with character skills and builds. Different skills builds can excel at different things, which means they rarely have to be directly compared against each other. Elements and gem colors will be changed. Normally in PoE 1, you have cold damage as dex type, lightning as int type, which will be changed in PoE 2. Tying specific weapon types to specific classes is basically just a way to make straightforward builds more obvious to newer players. As long as you're getting the attribute requirements to equip them, you should not actually feel like you're being forced into a specific weapon type. So if you do a super obvious 2-hex mace warrior, You should feel like you're doing a good thing and being rewarded for it. The main important thing is that the most obvious builds should feel good, as opposed to the PoE1 state of Fireball Elementalist is a trap. Specific classes will not be hard-tied to specific weapon types, just given natural synergies that work with the obvious weapons but could be used with others too. If you lack mana to cast specific skill, your character will not auto-attack. Like in PoE, you still can't use a skill unless you can pay for it already. There's no allowance for predicting the mana you'll gain during the start of the animation or anything like that. Basic attacks and the equivalent free spells are very important in the early game in PoE 2, partly because you will have to manage mana more carefully than in PoE 1, and partly because they might genuinely be your best single target option for the first few levels, depending on your class and skill choices. You can still expect most builds to aim to reach a point where they don't need to use free skills anymore later in the game. Mana is not meant to be something you can solve trivially like it is in PoE 1, but you can absolutely set yourself up with the right skills and mana-related investment such that you don't need to resort to free skills. That's also why transitioning over to utility options for your implicit spell is fairly natural, because the free damage spell is going to be much more important in the early game where you are struggling more with mana. The core function that the damaging implicit spells have to provide is being your basic attack replacement, since you can't actually attack with wands cast to staves anymore. That's why they're free, but it also means they have to be relatively simple, doubly so for the very low-level ones. Being simple does put some limits on how versatile they can be in the endgame though, but at the same time, you will have to leave open the possibility of using one of the damaging ones as a main damage source, even in the endgame if you want to scale it. If you use the bug command in-game, followed by a short description of the bug that sends your report, along with session info, to our bug feed, it works in PoE 1 and PoE 2.